Let's talk teleology. What now? We'll get to that. It seems to be a universal characteristic of human beings that we will ask why. We all know that 3 or 4 year old kid, our own, probably ourselves at one stage, who will always ask an endless string of why questions. Well, we never quite lose that habit. One of our first responses to anything that happens is to ask why. On the one hand, this is at the heart of the scientific process. We want to know why things happen, what causes them. But it's also at the heart of something else, which I'll come to in a moment. When we ask why, we can mean two different things. If I walk across this room and suddenly fall over, we might find ourselves asking why that happened. What caused it? And I might be able to answer that I tripped over the edge of the rug, or that some mischievous child, maybe that same 3 or 4 year old, left his marbles on the floor, or that I'd had a bit too much to drink and lost my balance. These are all cause and effect responses. And when I ask why in this situation, that's what I'm wanting to know. What caused this? A fancy term for this is etiology. This is often used in a medical context. What was the etiology of this disease or condition? What is its origin? But it can also be used more generally. Etiology is the study of the origin or causality of something. In the past, explanations for things were not always scientific. They could be mythological. An etiological myth or origin myth is one which seeks to explain current phenomena in terms of the past actions of, say, spirits, gods, or legendary heroes. Why is that river there? Why is that valley there? Why is that mountain there? Why is that big boulder there? More often today, though, we're seeking this-worldly explanations for things. Simple cause and effect. Well, not always so simple, but cause and effect. Why did I fall over? On the other hand, someone might ask you, why are you attending medical school? Of course, you might be able to explain this in terms of cause and effect, social, physiological, psychological, and emotional factors. All of these things may have contributed to the causal why of this. If you're an absolute determinist, this is really the only way to answer this question. I'm attending medical school because of an unbroken chain of cause and effect stretching back to the origin of the universe. However, we're more likely to answer the question, why are you attending medical school, with this answer: because I want to be a doctor. We explain the present situation in terms of a future goal rather than antecedent events. This is teleological thinking. The dictionary definition of this, at least the one I'm using here, is as follows: a doctrine explaining phenomena by final causes. In this case, the final cause, a cause that comes at the end of the process, is becoming a doctor. Teleology comes from the Greek telos, meaning goal or purpose, followed by the familiar ology, what we find in geology and theology and psychology and so on. Basically, in this case, the study of. So teleology is the study of final causes, ends, purposes. So when someone asks, why are you attending medical school? They're not asking you about the trail of past cause and effect. They're asking about your purpose. If someone close to us dies, particularly if they're quite young, we might find ourselves asking, why did this happen? If we ask the doctor this question, they're likely to give an etiological account. They'll probably explain it in terms of cause and effect. But that may not be what we're asking. And we may, in fact, want to put this question to a priest rather than to a doctor. Why did this happen? What purpose does it serve? What is the meaning of this event? This is a very different question. Asking the question in this way implies that we think someone or something had a purpose for this happening. It implies some kind of will or intention. If a volcano erupts and destroys a village, we're unlikely to look for a teleological explanation for this, although in earlier times we might have. We might think, for instance, that it was because the gods were angry. Today, though, we're more likely to answer in terms of pressure building in the mantle and causing this explosive event. It happened because of this pressure, but not, for instance, for the purpose of destroying the village. We don't tend to attribute will and intention to the volcano. However, our language is such that it can sometimes make it sound that way. We might say, for instance, that the volcano erupted in order to, or for the purpose of, relieving the pressure under the surface. I think we realise, though, that we're not attributing will or intention to the volcano. We're not saying that the volcano had the goal of relieving this pressure, so it decided to erupt to achieve that end. We're merely saying, in perhaps a misleading way, that the pressure caused the eruption. Evolution is a good example of how we can be careless in our use of language. We can speak as if evolution has a goal. We might imagine that the goal of evolution, for instance, is the rise of consciousness, maybe even of us in particular. Because we're one of the end products, so far, of the process of evolution, we mistake this for a goal, a telos, rather than just an outcome. Evolution has no goal, purpose, intention, plan, or even direction. Evolution is simply a process of cause and effect. The genetic constitution of organisms varies, as does their environment. Some individuals of a species are genetically more suited to a particular environment at a particular time than others of the same species. Perhaps they carry a new, particularly beneficial mutation. They live longer and produce more offspring. Their genes spread through the population. There's no goal or purpose here. If we think of death in this context, we might be inclined to say that the purpose of death is to allow for the process of natural selection. Evolution clearly could not happen, or at least it would happen much more slowly if death did not occur. But death was not invented for the purpose of facilitating the process of evolution. That's teleological thinking. Death happens, genetic variations occur, mutations happen. These factors combine to produce the effect we call evolution, the effect that we call us. Although sometimes we use teleological sounding language to explain natural events, as when we say that the volcano erupts for the purpose of relieving the underground pressure, this is not usually what we actually mean. However, when we ask, why did she have to die? This is often exactly what we mean. It's also what we mean when we ask, what's the meaning of life? Or what's the purpose of the universe? We're looking for teleological explanations. But such questions imply will and intention on the part of some agent. Only a being with intentions can do things for a reason, with a goal in mind. Now, people with religious beliefs may ask the question in a more pointed way. Why did God cause or allow this thing to happen? But even those without a belief in any such being can still find ourselves asking such questions. We may attribute this meaning or purpose rather vaguely to something less clearly defined, such as fate or karma. We don't really need to conceptualize it in this way at all, but the question remains there in our minds. Because, in the distant past, attributing the eruption of the volcano that destroyed our village to the will of the gods was the only way we had to explain that event. We understood nothing about the geological forces that caused the eruption. Teleological explanations were the only ones available to us. I think we still carry this hidden belief system within us. It's difficult to shake it off. Etiological explanations for why our loved one dies simply don't satisfy this need for a teleological explanation, something which attributes meaning and purpose to this seemingly random and meaningless event. It's why, in our most vulnerable moments, we fall back upon this search for teleological reasons to satisfy a deep emotional need. But, especially if we believe in an actual God, This search for a teleological explanation for a reason why God caused or allowed this to happen can be a terrible burden to bear. We're forced to twist ourselves into knots in order to believe something. They're with God now. God took them because he loves them so much. They're in a better place. We're forced to twist ourselves into believing these things, something which potentially makes us more angry than actually offering any comfort. We're forced to believe that the death of a loved one is somehow a good thing, despite that equally primeval impulse which tells us that it bloody well is not. I don't believe that there's a teleological explanation for such events, unless, of course, a human agent caused the death of my loved one for a purpose of their own. And I suppose in that case we should thank them if they've sent that person to a better place. There are only etiological explanations for these things, as there are only etiological explanations for the existence of the universe and for the origin of life. In the end, believe it or not, this comes as a relief when you finally accept it. Now I no longer have to wrestle with this other why.